was in Laguna Beach. We moved there when I was about 4 from Hollywood. And so my grammar school was in Laguna Beach first. When I was 11 in 1951, moved back to the LA area. I'm going to jump backwards for just a moment, because when I was there in Laguna Beach as a 4-year-old in the 4th grade, but in 1944 I was 4, and the war was still going on. VJ Day was we celebrated. All the kids went in and climbed on fire trucks, and everybody. Why am I saying this today? Is because everybody was doing the same thing. It was a national effort, a national emergency. There was leadership that gave direction. Everybody was part of the war effort, and we kids unfolded newspapers and made them into flat sheets. Why, I don't know, but we collected the grease off the kitchen stove and took it back to the meat market. Everybody turned out. They taped over the headlights. Everybody had blackout curtains. I mean, the practice bombing runs were on Coronado Island off the coast. The concussions, you'd go to sleep with them and wake up with them during the night. And to hear these independents today saying they can't be told what to do, and the freedom not to wear a mask, it tells me how young they are. I'm thinking of the tightest writing that I know of is the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Who, what, when, where, why, and how much. The brief bio in about 1951. And then you asked me, how did you get to Mendocino? The war ends, and in Laguna Beach, we're right on Highway 1. The convoys, the taped-over headlights, the war was much more visible to us and other people that I've spoken to that were alive at the time, but they didn't have a sense of being in the material side of the conflict. When in 51, my mother died, and family had been split for years before that, and I went off to New York to Schenectady for 3 months, which was like going into an ice box, but also such antiquity was both a welcome and unwelcome experience. Things changed, and I end up back again in Hollywood, and junior high school, Hollywood High School, with the idea of going to the Maritime Academy. I'd wanted to be a veterinarian, but never had the grades to pull that off. And got to the Maritime Academy in Vallejo, but they found out how colorblind I am. And that washed me out of there, finished at San Francisco State. So I get this degree that I didn't really use for the next 20 years. And end up going back on the waterfront and hanging out, getting jobs, and joining the Inland Boatmen's Union, and just plain working as a union guy. Well, Cuba, the Cuban fiasco really heats up, and Khrushchev and Kennedy are really trying to resolve it, and I'm eating with a group of people at a family-style cheap restaurant in Berkeley, appropriately named Red's. That day that I'm speaking of, in October of 1962, nobody honked a horn. Everybody drove politely. Nobody raised their voice. The whole city went quiet. And it was something, Khrushchev and Kennedy were going to resolve it or blow it up. geographically, we're next to the radiation laboratory, the Stanford accelerator, etc. And somebody at the dinner table says, "War is crazy." Somebody responds, "Only city people create war. Let's go to the country." Where would we go? Casper. Where's Casper? Follow us. So, and Norman, you've got the truck, so you can bring the piano. This is good liberal thinking, left-leaning, righteous people. They knew what to do. Bring the piano. So that's how I and a handful of others got to Casper and Mendocino in '62. And it took me less than a year to move my paperwork and start to straddle between the Bay Area and Mendocino coast. And about 20 plus minus years ago, around 1990, I'm still working. I'm working nights managing gangs of longshoremen in Stockton, Sacramento, San Francisco, Oakland, to try to balance my budget. And I've been working on the waterfront since the early '60s, having that degree from San Francisco State I never used, because I went back to the waterfront and finally got into management of loading and unloading ships. And I mentioned to you earlier that I have no memory of my father ever being at the dinner table or the breakfast table. And when my mother dies when I'm 11, there must have been some manner or character building that stepped in to be able to have this independence and willingness to take on risk, getting into situations that I knew I couldn't handle. Managed, lived through them, but high risk, very much so.
Well, let's back up just a second, because it's a curious story to me. So how did it go from you and your buds in '62, wanting to go up to Casper, and you having experience as a stevedore or as a longshoreman? Did you go back down to from Mendocino and try to get a job on the waterfront then? Is that what you were doing?
No. It happened through a guy by the name of George Kiskaddon, Kiskaddon. And he had a boat named Spirit, also AKA SF1. And he was he had this boat designed by Sparkman Stevens. He was working on a budget, but he also was skipper of a shipping company called Marine Chartering. So it still exists 50, 60 years later in San Francisco. So he reached out and put together crews to sail his boat across oceans, racing against much richer competition. I was chasing the lady that would become my first wife out to Hawaii. The Transpac race was just ending as I arrived. And I spent some time there. It was time for everybody to go home. I knew that the draft was after me. I was trying to have a good time until. And I went down the row of all of these boats that would be returning to California. And I was offered one berth after another from these great big fancy rich boats. Well, I'd been to the academy for a year. I'd worked on tugs during college. I'd worked in the shipyards during college, and I knew something about sailing. I'd never done a long voyage at sea, but I decided that it's getting too easy to get on a boat, and they were all putting on too much food and putting on too many people. I said, I want to work and I want to learn. So I began going down the road to get to, and then finally I got to the smallest boat, which was George Kiskaddon's Spirit. And the naval architect, Gary Mall, was skipper. And I interviewed with him, and he said, gee, I don't care that you took a tugboat to Peru. I don't care that you that you went to Japan when you were a teenager. What they teach you at the Maritime Academy won't do anything about sailing. And his steamship company was all commercial, all heavy duty, all maritime. The word sailor wouldn't, seaman, yes, sailor, no. And he said, I like your experience. So after he returned, we get 27 days later without an engine, we get to Sausalito and tie the boat up. Not a month later, he's at my place in Fort Bragg, and he offers me this trip around to Greenwich, Connecticut, if I would book to outfit the boat starting in November, sail in December, race in January, February, and get to Greenwich, Connecticut on May 1. And he would pay me $5 a day. It's the best job I ever had. And so it was through that, after I did that delivery, I go back to pounding nails in Mendocino. I don't have a career. I'm not doing anything. I'm just waiting to see what happens next. And Kiskaddon calls me up and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, I guess I'm waiting for your phone call. And he says, "Well, it's time for you to go back to work." And so he called Elliott Horseman at Matson Terminals. This was a short job interview. It lasted 5 minutes. And he said, "Can you read and can you write?" And I said, "I'm not really very well read, and I think I can write some." And he said, "Good, you can do accident reports. Show up at pier, whatever the pier was." They have later transferred me over to work at the Army docks in Oakland. The war in Vietnam is really pumped up. And I had made a vow that I did not want to learn how to kill somebody. Even a conscientious objector has to go through basic and is taught how to kill. Unfortunately, a lot of those people who got that training are now today's police force. So they were paying. I was in 1963. I'm working on the waterfront, and I'm drawing $3,000 a month. What a! So I worked for 7 or 8 months, and I'm saying I'm loading all kinds of material, from Sherman tanks to fire trucks, and then small arms ammunition to be followed by body bags. And I'm saying, hey, if I'm not willing to go do it, I can't profit from it. And I gave him 2 weeks' notice and quit. One of the best decisions, and I was condemned for taking such a position. And I was placed in Coventry by my coworkers. No one talks to you. It comes out of Britain as a if you go against the Union, you're placed in Coventry. You're iced. So many months later, Kiskaddon calls again, and he says, "Call Marine Terminals. They're waiting for you." And the rumor had gone around the waterfront. But they agreed to, a year later, at age 25, they put me back to work at $1,500 a month, which for some people wouldn't be too shabby today. Stevedore companies hire longshoremen. I was climbing down into the lower holds. I knew what was happening on the dock, how the truck traffic, the material, the tools, all of that. Stevedore superintendents are basically in charge of the entire operation, and just below that will be the walking bosses. Below the walking bosses are the gang bosses. On the cargo handling are the super clerks, and then the assistant clerks below that. And then below that are the coopers, the old style word. The coopers take care of the busted cargo, the broken tools.
Did you know Eric Hoffer?
Well, we had a conversation once. And I was just green. I don't think I'd been working for a month or two down at Pier 92 by Islas Creek. And Eric Hoffer was winch driver working on a three-legged general cargo ship. Three-legged means that it's got a winch driver. No, it's got two winch drivers and a signalman. And I'm coming back after lunch, and the guys down in the hold are yelling back and forth. And of course, I'm there as not having learned much at all. That I'm of course looking for the guys that have been drinking their lunch instead of their sandwich. And I'm looking down the hatch to see if I was seeing any motion or movement or manner that might show me as a 23-year-old. So Eric Hoffer yells down from being the winch driver and says, "And what are you looking at?" And I mumble some kind of answer. I'm stupid, I'm wondering if anybody's been drinking. And he said, "What are you?" And I said, "I'm the assistant stevedore." And Eric Hoffer bends over the controls on his winch handles, and he says, "You wouldn't make a pimple on a stevedore's ass." So there's this roar of laughter coming out of the lower hole down at Islas Creek. Okay, well, there's a lesson learned. A couple of years later, I asked a walk-in boss, working at night, so I was the only white guy down there. Eric worked daytime. And when I worked nights, I was the only white guy down on the front, working for marine terminals. And I asked this walk-in boss, also black, I said, "Well, how do you think I'm doing?" He said, "Oh, you'd know. You would know. They would have cut the tires off your fucking truck." Yeah.
During this time, where's Harry Bridges then?
Harry Bridges was being Jimmy Herman from the International Longshore Association, the ILA on the East Coast. At about the time that Hoffer was outed or offed, there was talk between Jimmy Herman and the Teamsters, and I don't know if Bridges was in favor or not, but I think he was probably opposed to the idea that if we got all the stevedore, all of the longshore organizations together, and the trucks, that you would have total control of the transportation industry in the country. So Bridges retires out, and Herman somehow leaves the ILA and gets in charge of the ILWU. Well, I'd met Bridges very briefly through Kiskaddon, and Herman comes down to try to force me off my job at Pier 92 in the city. And he says, "You're doing longshore work." And I said, "No, I'm not." And the company was going to back me. He said, "Listen, I want you to join the union. I'll give you an A book if you quit." And I said, "No, I won't. I won't do that." And years later, I was sharing this tale with others who knew something about the longshore industry in the city, and he said, "You made the right decision." He promised that to a lot of guys.
Wow.
I was working on the waterfront from the time I was in college until Desert Storm in 1990. So Kiskaddon helped me get my yacht and shipbroker's license. I later did marine surveys. I got an lifetime instructor certificate for marine and maritime technologies for California community colleges. I love teaching. Working on the waterfront certainly prepared me to be a county supervisor. Decisions on the waterfront are made very fast. There's no conversation. you get or give direction, and it gets done. There's not are we going to do it this way or do it that way? Maybe a couple of people have to make a decision. Are we going to cover up because of rain or sell the gangs or what? But that's it. Whatever that decision is, it's over. And so coming to making a decision, it was very quick, and hopefully you're doing it right, because to have a ship with gangs of longshoremen on it, it's tens of thousands of dollars a day. If you're tying up the ship, tying up the dock, you got as many as 200 guys down there. Those are the old days before containers. Some ships even had steam winches. I mean, it was, unfortunately, I didn't realize I was right on the cusp of change. So one of the first things we did was PG&E was getting ready to build a nuclear power plant at Point Arena, and which is just several miles south of the earthquake fault. And so those of us in our early 20s, we immediately banded together and began a pushback on PG&E. And we got the community, we got all of our, I can't say all, but most of our age group, except maybe the guys working only in the woods, and raised a number of issues. And it wasn't long after that that we were opposing Japanese whaling. And at the same time the music is going on, there are a number of us that are looking into the civic issues that are happening. And then the offshore oil drilling starts, the exploration part of it. And then becomes the issue of the protection of the town of Mendocino and what's going to happen. Well, Prop 20 for the Coastal Act was on the ballot in 1974. We've been pushing back on the Board of Forestry to redefine forest. And in 1972, we got the Zeeberg forestry bill passed. So trees were taxed for their size and their canopy vertically instead of horizontally on the back of a truck going to the mill. So the intention was to slow down the taking so we would be sustainable. Well, the battle goes on today. The state still lets industry people sit as the majority on the Board of Forestry, and the logging practices are not yet sustainable. The number of trees, yes, but in board feet of lumber, no. It was a hot spot, and there was a reason for that, is that in the late 60s, 70s, not so much in the 80s or 90s at all, is that we had people that were here from Kent State, Attica, the HUAC hearings, had been in politics. They knew Paul Katzeff was a friend of Hunter Thompson. There was just a hotbed of political discussion and strong opinion, well spoken. And Rachel Bina at Rachel's Inn, who was eventually one of the environmental chair for the California caucus, Democrats, invited all kinds of political people here. It formed a relationship, and through all of it, eventually was thought, why aren't we running for office? We established what became fondly called the circle process. Really, it was very similar to a convention, and chose a candidate to run for supervisor after Bruce Levine had done so and lost. So we said, we need a different way of doing this. And so we put this convention circle process together, and Cressida Campbell was chosen as sharp, intelligent, and all of the other people who were thinking of running vowed at the beginning of the process to support the person who finally was chosen in the circle process. It was not me. It was Cressida, and so I gave her my full support. And the two of us were eventually the last two. And she called me about 3 weeks later, as the campaign really got time in late 77, 78 to get the campaign started, and called me up and said that she couldn't do it. And would I do it? And I said, that's not my choice. If you can't do it, and she just had a positive pap smear. And she had lost several relatives because of uterine cancer. And I said, we're going back to the circle process. And so we did. I got immediate strong support by zip codes in the 5th District. We put a 3x5 card file together so that we knew someone who knew every voter in the district. The county had never seen a campaign like this. A lot of the campaign materials are now in the county museum. Well, it was a new way of doing things, and I was as surprised as everybody else when we won and took out a two-term Italian Republican rancher just south of Elk. The 5th District at that time went from South Fort Bragg and Simpson Lane across to Reeves Canyon, and then across Highway 101 to Lake County at Talmadge, down to Sonoma County, and from Walala to Fort Bragg. Well over 1,000 square miles. We put a little bag of fish humus on next to every mailbox that we could find. We put out several thousands of these with a little label on it saying, for your garden, these are waste materials that could be an industry. It takes 1,000 years to generate 1 inch of soil. A nation that loses its topsoil loses its independence. And so it was just one item after another. People were sleeping on the campaign floor so that they could work late and get up early. I was working for them. And in the circle process, we weren't just talking about the who. We were talking about what did we believe in? What did we want to do? Well, some of those issues were easy. Let's make sure that let's clean up PG&E and get them out of here. Let's protect forests and fishery. Let's oppose offshore oil. The biggie was let's get recognition and respect for the owner-builders. Let's change the building codes. Let's modify the county's idea of code enforcement. Let's work in Sacramento to get a law passed. And I did not. My campaign did not. But it supported Mika Wawona to go work with Jerry Brown in his first term to put in Class K, the Class K bill that allowed building with a whole different new set of rules. Wow. So I was the bag man. My job was to deliver the mail. Again, I'm spending more than half of my lifetime in Ukiah. Around people that are wearing nice pressed clothes and get haircuts. So I'm pretty much out of touch with what's going on back in the community. Sometimes feel like a visitor, either in Ukiah, Sacramento, Washington, Los Angeles.
Let's talk about that. So I have 2 questions. One, obviously, is the process still in effect and is it still working? But I guess previous to that question would be, what, for you then and people on the coast, then you saw a real change that made your lives better on the coast by those changing of the regulations. It improved the lives of many people, in their ability to live, at least with dwellings and things and other aspects.
Not only that, one of the things that I did not do, again, I was one of the many, Michael Nolan, Paul Katzif, Michael Nissenberg, were Henry Teller. They worked extraordinarily well together, years and years of experience, and they developed what was called the Clean Slate program. Somehow, what we found was that if we did the work for the county was, if it looked like county work, they might well support it, which they did. Well, what did this do? This allowed to set aside the number of domiciles on a parcel, what they were built of, how they were built, how many people were living there. It required that these structures built without permit before meet the current code for propane, electricity, water, septage, and that created an opportunity for 18 months for all of these illegal builders to come in and get legal. Just a couple of years ago, down in Albion, what would have been termed a tear down most everywhere else was sold for $750,000. Wow. This program really enriched those who participated. And most of those people, why did they build that way? Because they didn't have any money. They probably never had any money. Back in the 60s, you could come up here and buy an acre for $1,000. I think I saw music as entertainment. And when you go back, everything I've been talking about is work. Protect the coast is work to protect the forest and fisheries. I'm still not drawn by entertainment. Knowing Gene Parsons and Ramblin Jack is way more than a friendship than it is a sharing of music.
We were talking about politics, and I just wondered if some musicians that came to Mendo and hung out and were part of the musical scene got involved in politics and stayed involved in the political arena more than some that just played music. Were there any that did?
Boy, I don't think so. I cannot think of anybody in the music world that they might have been on the beach while we're right down on the edge trying to protect the ocean, having some kind of a rally or whatever. But if they're on the beach, they're up on the high end of the beach. But a lot of events took place here that I would hear about later that I was just not privy to or knew about. So I'm on. I know the music is going on, and I've often thought that if there was we've got, I call them two-dimensional artists, painters, etc. Potters are three-dimensional artists. But the art form that is all of these forms put together, and the one with the most lasting, most popular reputation, and the best known for was music. And if you go, and so your book and your interest is really targets, maybe without intention, being really, music came in, it went to the top, it stayed there for a long time, it is the most remembered, it is the most collected of any of the art forms. If you go and take a look at what happened to Bill Zaka's prints, what happened to Emily Lou Packard's, what happened to artists after art, friends of mine who were serious art collectors in San Francisco for decades came up here to take a look. They left one weekend later and said, nothing here is collectible. So the music that is remembered and is collected is what was happening here. And like all good things that are really that good, they don't last long. Well, I had a show there actually just a year ago on maritime history, of a collection of Norman Vall. So that put me in touch with Kelly House. They're very tight for space, and they could or should have stored much more than they have, but they're not a repository. They're able to keep just where do these things go? I would ask that question of Gene Parsons. Well, you know that Gene sang with the Byrds. And where is their history? Another person that was here was Ramblin Jack Elliott.
He played here in Sacramento about a year and a half ago.
Jack on show nights is, you can't read him. You don't know what's going to happen. I talked to people that have been there, and they said he talked more than he sang. But Jack and I go back to the early 60s, and I met up with him through the sailing community down in the Bay Area. Aside from being crazed about big trucks, he had a real interest in sailing and in the history of sailing. And I was hanging out with a group of people to which he was a very popular member. He was here back in the mid '70s, and Jack was. He could not stay away from the women, or the women could not stay away from him. And he was just some kind of a magnet. So he had a place just a quarter mile up the road from me here, and I finally put a sign in the driveway that the zoo was closed. I don't know if that deterred anybody or not.
Why are you still here? Because obviously it meant something to you. It compelled you to stay. You raised your kids, and you're doing pretty well. You know, I mean, you know.
It works for some people. Other people I know that have been here for decades, I think that there was a common feeling of being very anti-materialistic. And if that's not the right word, then it was almost an aversion to money. And certainly it's easy to say that their capitalism is what the big mistake is. But in reality, in my view, it's materialism. We keep buying what capitalists build. People here not only don't support capitalism, most people here are like you and me. With if it still works, we still have it. So it's.
And that's not hoarding, Norman. That's not hoarding. That's just collecting your good stuff.
Since leaving the Board of Supervisors in '95, I was on the Building Code Appeals Board for a little bit. I've chaired the Mental Health Board twice. I chaired the Board of Directors at the Mendocino Arts Center. I voted in '94 to found the CASA, C-A-S-A, Court-Appointed Supportive Advocates for the Juvenile Superior Court in the county. And I joined that in '95, and I still volunteer with them, and I'm the chair of that board now. I left in '95, and by chance I was 55 at that time, and I found out that I was eligible for retirement, which I don't think I've ever deserved. So it's part of the reason that I volunteer as much as I do, is so that I can make the sense of receiving retirement worthwhile, but for the community. The retirement system is just crazy. It's too many previous boards and retirement boards for these counties have they gave away the store. They made them way too generous.
Do you think that generosity in the long run impacts the county negatively?
Yes, because we've got some people that are doing very well, thank you, and other people that are absolutely struggling. I know a lot of people they might not have worked as many hours a week as I did, but they certainly did work as hard. and to the best of their ability. Why do I get $1,200 a month, $1,300 a month? I'm receiving more in retirement than I ever received as a salary. What is that about? Well, I finally figured out, why did they take civics out of the school? George W. Bush was at about that time, or might it even have been Clinton. Oh, we've got to have more room, not just for the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also to enter the computer world. So we'll get rid of civics. Well, one or two generations later, when I talk to kids, they have no, or younger people, which to me today means anybody under 40, they don't have any idea of the federal system, the state system, counties or cities, who's responsible for doing what. Both comedians on the left and news people left and right have mocked the government for the last 20, 30 years, and we have one or two generations that are convinced that anybody in government is a crook. To complete my thoughts on teaching civics, it was a long thought out. It took decades to accomplish the reality that there would be fewer voters, they'd be easier to control, they wouldn't ask as many questions because they wouldn't have any information, and it's a pretty dry subject to begin with. And if you recall, I presume you're old enough to have had civics in junior, senior high school. So you did have that, and then almost every other sentence is that you're here to prepare to learn how to vote, or why you will vote. Vote, vote, vote. Well, when civics disappeared, that constant mantra of voting was no longer inculcated. It was no longer a permanent thing that you would do. I have a real challenge time talking to people in their 20s, 30s, 40s about trying to get them to register. If Biden doesn't win, this country, if you want to know what the country is going to be like and what it will become, it's already written out. You can read it. Read the Declaration of Independence. That's what the Trump supporters thrive on. That is the country that they want. Absolutely free to do whatever you want to do. And then read the Constitution without the amendments. And read it thinking, this is what the founding fathers that we so highly hold with esteem and respect of what they did and who they excluded, et cetera, et cetera. It's the amendments that make the Constitution of the body that we so respect. It's not the internal detail that is in the Constitution itself. Nowhere in the Declaration or in the Constitution is the word democracy used. We were no more democratic. Where we're going with Trump is Grover Cleveland and FDR replaced, what's his name?
Hoover.
In other words, those are absolute Republican administrations, anti-union, anti-worker, just one bad experience after another. And that is what the Trump supporters do not see. They don't read. They might be very smart, but they're not well. The objective today is, I think, by the masses, is to be entertained. If you flip through the channels on television, virtually very, very little is there that is educational. Very little. Very, and far less is historic. And when you look at the demographics of who watches television, it's mostly old people. But If you're younger, you're going to want more and more social media.